What's going on, everybody? This is Brian Mazique. I am a fight guy, a Forbes contributor, and also write for Heavy.com. And we are powered by Fight TV and presented by Bet Online. If you're watching this right now on YouTube, make sure you are subscribing and liking this video. Be here with you watching the video in the chat so that we can talk about this entire card, UFC 250, taking place in Las Vegas, Nevada on Saturday. It is going to be an interesting event. Not getting a lot of pub and love from an overall star standpoint, but there are some very interesting fights, and we're dedicating this entire episode, and we're probably going to do this every Wednesday when there is a UFC fight card. The entire Wednesday show of the Fight Guys is going to be dedicated to me breaking down that event, going fight by fight, looking at the odds, and then with me doing a preview of that fight and giving my prediction. And in the event that you can't watch this entire show, because I'll be sitting here talking to you for a minute, we'll break down each fight into individual videos as we have in the previous weeks. So you'll be able to watch the fights or the previews of the fights that you want to see. So without further ado, we're going to jump into this first fight on this card. And this one is kind of been on again and off again kind of a fight on the card overall. Evan Dunham, 38 years old, veteran, name pretty much synonymous with, kind of, I won't say old school UFC, but definitely like in that almost pioneer kind of range overall. But this one is, in my opinion, a pretty easy one to call. And I could be wrong, and we're certainly going to find out if I'm wrong. But Evan Dunham's, like I said, 38 years old, coming out of retirement after his second consecutive loss. He suffered that in 2018 against Francisco Trinaldo, making his way back in here to the octagon. He's taking on Herbert Burns, who is the brother, in case you're wondering, of new 170-pounder, number one contender, actually, is Gilbert Burns. This fight is going to take place at a 150-pound catch weight. I think that's probably more for Dunham, who might have, kind of been committing to this a little bit late and coming in and jumping in back into this fight after at one point it was canceled and called off. But Burns is 32 and he's on a hot streak, man. His last time out, he smoked Nate Landwehr with a vicious, nasty knee, knocked him out cold. And he did that after he choked out Derek Minner on Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series. So the Burns family has some things happening. Now, if you're not familiar with Evan Dunham, you don't know he is a very good grappler. Always has been a very good grappler. But in my opinion, I don't think he's necessarily superior to Gilbert Burns on the ground. And that is where you would suspect Evan Dunham to have his advantage if he has one. On the feet, I think we've seen from Herbert Burns, what we've seen from him, especially initially, you'd have to say his stand-up is better than Evan Dunham. Now, I've been one that has followed one championship for the past 3-4 years. And so I remember and I know that Herbert Burns did quite well in one championship before he lost his last two fights and moved over and started fighting elsewhere. So he took out some relatively solid names. Timofey Nastyukhin, who is actually the guy who just knocked out Eddie Alvarez at one championship. He had some good wins there. So some people maybe stateside may not be familiar with Herbert Burns, but I am. And I think that he's really shown and picked up some serious momentum here with the UFC, winning 2 in a row. And I really think that though Dunham's a good grappler, I don't think he outclasses Burns there, but I do think that Burns has the potential to outclass Evan Dunham on the feet. And I see this one going a pretty lopsided way. I think Herbert Burns, who is a minus 225 favorite, according to Bet Online's most recent odds, I think he gets this victory by a first or second round TKO. I honestly don't see this one being overly difficult for my man Herbert Burns. I think he stays hot and gets this victory. And I don't know. Evan Dunham's going to have some questions more than likely to answer because he came out of retirement for this fight. And so the pressure's on him, obviously, to get the victory, but I don't think he'll get that done. I got Herbert Burns getting this victory, first or second round TKO. Let's take a look now at Alonzo Minifield versus Devin Clark. This is another prelim fight. It should probably be the second fight that you see on the card that evening. And Alonzo Minifield, if you haven't seen him, he's another one that came from Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series. He's a freak athletically. Just in every way, shape, or form. I'm talking about strength. I'm talking about explosiveness, the length of his arms. Just the dude he's one of those guys. He was a fantastic athlete as a football player, but I just think that combat sports is definitely more up his alley, and he's pretty much shown that. I think it's a good slight step up for him taking on Devin Brown Bear Clark. As you can see, Bet Online has Alonzo Minifield as a -212 favorite. Devin Clark's a +182 underdog. But like I said, man, Minifield's just a freak athletically, as big and strong as they come in light heavyweight. To be honest, I got a comparison for you for Alonzo Minifield. He reminds me physically and athletically, and when you look at him from an explosion standpoint, he reminds me a little bit of Anthony Rumble Johnson. He really, really does. And he packs a similar wallop. Now, we don't have the history of knockouts that we have with Rumble to give that a direct comparison, but I'm calling it kind of early. I'm telling you, he's trending in a Rumble kind of a way, so we'll see what happens. Now, his thing of it is that he hasn't fought in a year. He had 2 fights that were canceled. One of them was against Devin Clark, so he got caught up in the whole pandemic and the delay thing, so he's been out of there for a year. So this is him just getting back into the whole flow of things. So we'll see if the layoff does anything against him. Now, Clark is a smart fighter, and he has pretty solid grappling, just overall wrestling. But he has an inability sometimes, in my opinion, to handle an onslaught from an athletic guy who is coming and bringing the fight to him. And if you look at this matchup, that is exactly what he's faced with Minifield. But the thing about Minifield and what he has to be aware of, because Devin Clark, as I said, is a smart fighter. Minifield cannot get caught up too early with being overly aggressive and getting sloppy. That's something that he has kind of shown a little bit of a tendency to do. Gets into a situation where he may think he has a fighter or an opponent hurt, and then he kind of starts to throw technique out and starts just to depend on speed, athleticism, and power, and it can get him in some trouble. I'm not sure Devin Clark's the type of fighter that can take advantage of it, but he might be. For Clark to win this fight, though, he has to weather the storm early. If he can survive an early rush from Minifield, then he'll have a chance, maybe, at taking advantage of Minifield if he gets gas. Which Minifield, if you look at him fight, you can imagine how mid-second round, late second round, he could start to get a little bit tired. All of that said, I still have to go with Minifield to get the victory. But if Devin Clark does win, that's going to have to be his path to victory. But just unfortunately for him, I don't think he will make it out of the first round. I think Minifield is going to bring that pain and bring those bombs. And I think that at some point, Clark just has a hard time evading it. Is just not able to get out of the way. Remember, we're talking about an octagon again in UFC Apex, where we're talking about a 25-foot octagon and not a 30-foot octagon. And in some matchups, that can be a factor. And I think that Minifield brings it to him. And I think that he overwhelms and ultimately stops Devin Clark with a first-round TKO. Now, let's take a look at our next fight. Our next fight coming up right here is Jussier Formiga. We've been going through each fight on this card on UFC 250. And this one, I'm telling you guys, is tough to call. I'm not even going to lie to you. This one, I deliberated over this particular prediction for a good amount of time. And there's a reason why. It's a serious step up, first of all, for Alex Perez. He comes in ranked number 9, but he has not fought anybody on Jussier Formiga's level. And Jussier Formiga is the best flyweight in the last 10 years to never get that title shot. If you look at everybody through that whole flyweight situation, right? You just look through all of those people, and you remember how much Demetrius Johnson just dominated, right? Jussier Formiga's pretty much been like in the top 5 or so that entire time. But for whatever reason, just losing at the wrong time here or there, not getting the opportunity. He's the only dude through this entire era that did not get a shot at Demetrius Johnson. He made his UFC debut in 2012. He lost that fight, got knocked out by John Dodson, came back, beat Chris Carriasso, Then he lost by first round TKO to Joseph Benavidez. Then he runs off 3 straight wins over Scott Jorgensen, Zach Makovsky, and Wilson Hayes. Then he loses a split decision to Henry Cejudo, beats Dustin Ortiz, loses the unanimous decision to Ray Borg. But then he rolls off wins against Yuta Sasaki, Ben Nguyen, Sergio Pettis, and Davison Figueiredo. Then runs into Joseph Benavidez for a second time and loses. And then his last fight, he loses to Brandon Moreno, which was just in March. So he's had a really good career, man. Just a very good career, but just hasn't been able to get over that hump. And right now, he's on a 2-fight losing streak heading into this bout with Alex Perez, who is definitely an up-and-comer. You're looking at the age situations. Jussier Formiga's 35. Alex Perez is 28 years old. The grappling advantage is hard to determine who has it because Perez is a very good wrestler. But the slight advantage from a jiu-jitsu standpoint probably definitely has to go to Formiga, who is fantastic at getting the chokes and just maintaining advantageous positions when on the ground. I would say Perez is probably a better striker and probably a little bit more naturally athletic, but that's not where he even gets most of his victories. Perez depends on the ground game more so than anything to get his wins. I mean, it's like I said, it's a tough call. Formiga's on a two-fight losing streak, but all of his losses have pretty much come to the elite fighters in the flyweight division, and we don't know yet whether or not Alex Perez is really an elite fighter. He hasn't beaten major competition as of yet. So is this going to be his breakthrough? I'm hesitant. I was tending, towards maybe picking Perez. You look at the Bet Online odds; they have him as a minus 127 favorite, and Jussier Formiga's at a plus 107 underdog according to Bet Online. But I'm gonna have to go with the underdog here. I'm going with Formiga by submission. 3 of his 5 losses have come by sub, and Formiga, I mean, when I say his, I'm talking about Perez. Formiga is still nasty on the ground, and for Perez to have had situations in his past where he's gotten caught up on the ground, getting into trouble against opponents on the ground, and to have 3 submission losses. Now, granted, he hasn't had a submission loss since 2016, but he's losing on the ground to guys who are far inferior from a jiu-jitsu standpoint than Formiga. And I don't think that that's a good look. Again, this is a tough call. And if this was one of those NFL, confidence polls or picks or pools, I may not have a very high number on this particular pick, but I'm going to go with Formiga with the submission victory. I'm going to say a 2nd or 3rd round submission victory. I just think that he staves off that 3-fight losing streak and pulls out a victory over a very tough and younger flyweight contender. So that's my official prediction. We will see how it ultimately goes, though. All right, it is time for the next fight on this card. Another super tough call. Now, this one's a tough call for a different reason, though, because I'm going to tell you guys something. Charles Byrd has let me down so many times when it comes to these predictions, right? So in his last fight, I had him basically taken out. Well, not his last fight. Last fight was against Edmund Shabazian, and Edmund Shabazian might be a future champion. So that is what it is. But fight before that was against Darren Stewart, and I'm swearing, I'm like, Charles Byrd's got this guy. Darren Stewart has some holes in his game. I know that Charles Byrd's a fantastic wrestler. He's going to lean on that to get the advantage in this fight. And he was winning. He was in control and could have taken the fight down, taking Stewart down to the ground and really taking control, but he didn't do that and ultimately ended up getting caught and getting knocked out. Edmund Shabazian got him the same way. He was shooting the takedown, didn't protect his head as he was going for the double leg, and Shabazian just starts hitting him with the Travis Brown-like elbows on the side of the head and ultimately gets to stop. So now Charles Byrd's sitting here looking at this 2-fight losing streak when he came from Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series as this really promising fighter whose record at the time was 10-4. Record at that time was 8-4. Looks good. He gets 2 straight wins. He beats Randall Wallace on Tuesday Night Contender Series, then turns around and beats John Phillips by 1st round submission, wraps him up in the rear naked choke. And you're thinking this is 2 straight rear naked choke wins for him. And you're thinking this is how he's going to fight in the UFC. He's going to lean on his strengths, which is the wrestling. And he comes out here against Darren Stewart and Shabazian. Well, not Shabazian, but against Darren Stewart, and he wants to stand. So it was a real bit disappointing, and it made me question his fight IQ. So he's going in here against a guy in Maki Pitolo who loves to stand and bang. He loves it. He's fantastic at it, right? And he has a very good chin. Doesn't have the greatest defense at all. Defense is pretty suspect. But Charles Byrd's chin, I think at this point, we're safe to say it's a little suspect. And he has this tendency that I'm seeing, I think, to try to stand too long. And with him being a strong wrestler, and you're looking at Maki Pitolo, who has not defended takedowns all that well, and Pitolo's record is not great. You're seeing 11-5 here, but if you check on SureDog, it says he's 12-7. So he doesn't have this sparkling record at all. Doesn't have good stand-up defense, and he can crack. So you would think that Byrd's path to victory was going for the takedown. I think I'm going to allow Byrd to get me one more time. I'm going to leave myself vulnerable for him one more time. He's a -183 favorite according to Bet Online. Maki Pitolo's a +158 underdog. Byrd is a guy who he looks the part, but like I said, he has burned me before. This is a guy he should be beating. He should be beating Maki Pitolo. But I do have some fear here. But I'm going to still say he's going to take control of this fight, getting the takedowns, staying in top control, and kind of riding this thing out. And I think ultimately Maki Pitolo gives him the opportunity to get the submission. I think that he gets back to his dominating from top position, taking advantage of choking opportunities. Maki Pitolo, I'm sorry, I think I said he was 12-7. I think he's 12-5 according to SureDog. But 2 of his losses have come by submission. He lost to Dakota Cochran in July of 2017 by a guillotine choke. So it's not like it's impossible to get him in this way or in this situation. And if you look at his last fight against Callan Potter at UFC 243 in October 2019, those guys were throwing heat early. And Pitolo was arguably getting the better of some of those exchanges. Maybe his punches were having a little bit more of effect. And Callan Potter took control of that fight by turning it into a wrestling match and dominating for the top from top position. If Charles Byrd is smart, he has watched that fight. His corner, his team has watched that fight, and they're not going to waste time getting into banging situations with Maki Pitolo. They're going to get this fight to the ground, and they should be able to make it a lot easier for themselves in doing so. And so I am going to go with Byrd by a second round submission. But if you can hear the tone of my voice, you know that I'm thinking, don't blow this one again, Charles. So that's my prediction for that one. So the next fight, let's look at this one. I'm telling you, hard stuff to call back to back to back here on this card. Cody Stamann, number 12 overall, against Brian Boom Kelleher. Now, Kelleher, he's like the Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series assassin. I mean, he has just destroyed these guys. O'Day Osborne, one time, and in the last fight he had against Azure, he completely dismantled this guy. So these guys come up and they look like they're fire, and they just get fed to Kelleher, and he handles it. And to the UFC's credit, he's fought 2 up-and-coming guys coming from Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series, and recognizing that Kelleher's a veteran, then now giving him a chance to take on a ranked opponent in Stamann, who comes in number 12 overall. Thing about Kelleher is, though, he has struggled against the ranked guys or the better fighters who are a little bit more highly touted. So he has the losses to John Lineker. He also lost a very highly touted Montel Jackson. If you ask me, 2 of the young guys besides Shabazian who have the most look like, yeah, this might be a future champion, it's Montel Jackson, it is Roosevelt Roberts, and then it's Edmund Shabazian. Those 3 guys right now are 3 of the most promising young fighters in any weight class. Obviously, there's some other guys out there who haven't quite gotten there yet. There's even one on this card in Sugar Sean O'Malley, but those guys really stand out to me. So those were tough fights that was a tough fight for Kelleher against Jackson, and he did not come out on top. He ended up getting submitted. But if you compare this particular matchup, right, Kelleher is a better striker, in my opinion, than Cody Stamann. Cody Stamann is a really good athlete, a little bit explosive, but I haven't seen him be super effective as a striker in his career. And if just take a look at what he's done in his career from and the ways that he has won, right? That's always key. And the guy has a really good record, 18-2-1, hasn't really been definitively beaten in the UFC. Only loss he has was he's only been definitively beaten one time in the UFC, and that was with that ridiculous knee bar that Aljamain Sterling put on him. Like, I didn't even know a human being was supposed to be able to bend that way. Obviously, they're not supposed to be. That's why he tapped. His last fight, I thought he got a little bit robbed. I thought that draw with him, he probably deserved the victory over Song Yadong, who is getting a lot of benefit of the doubts on some of these decisions, to be honest, because you can also say that he got away with one against Marlon Cheeto Vera in his last fight. But at any rate, Stamann doesn't get stops. He doesn't stop guys. He has out of all of his victories in the UFC, he's never had a single stoppage victory ever. Gets a lot of close decisions. When he started in the UFC, got a unanimous decision against Terrion Ware. Then got a split decision win over Tom Duquesnoy and a split decision win over Brian Caraway. Then he gets submitted by Sterling, gets a unanimous decision victory over Alejandro Perez, and then he gets the majority draw with Song Yadong. He's not getting stoppages at this level, which is a little troublesome, because I would, like I said, I call him a so-so striker, though he does have some power. He's a strong wrestler. But when you're not getting finishes, you're leaving yourself open with these kind of quiet rounds. Now, you're facing a guy who absolutely is a finisher. Kelleher has proven that he's a finisher. And even when the fight does go to a decision, Kelleher has never lost a decision in the UFC at all, period. And the last time he lost a decision in his career was 7 years ago. So if you're kind of weighing the flow of how this fight can go, I'm really leaning towards Kelleher here. I think he has shown himself to be the better striker. And when the fight does go to the ground, this guy is really underrated with his submission skills. He has a heck of a squeeze. And I know that Stamann's going to want to go for that wrestling. And also, don't underestimate Brian Kelleher's fight IQ. He comes in with a solid game plan. You have to out-execute him. And I'm just not sure. I don't think Stamann's going to be able to do that. And on top of not being able to out-execute him, I think that Kelleher is going to get an opportunity to submit Cody Stamann. And that's my prediction. It's a bold one. And this is obviously, these are pretty significant odds here. Cody Stamann, a -252 favorite. Brian Kelleher is a +212 underdog. But I am going with this big underdog here. And I'm going with Kelleher by a second round submission. And I know Stamann's a tough guy to submit, because wrestlers like him are most of the time don't get themselves in that situation. But I don't know, man. I think Kelleher's in a good place right now. I think he's flowing. I think he's been super active. I think he's right in a good spot. And I think he gets this really big victory, which is probably going to be the biggest win of his entire fighting career. So he is my pick in this one. I guess it's my first significant underdog pick on this particular card. All right, moving to the next prelim fight as we go through everything in UFC 250. Ian Heinisch against Gerald Meerschaert, right? Gerald Meerschaert is a submission specialist. These are really close odds. You got -125 favorite for Ian Heinisch, +105 underdog for Gerald Meerschaert. 2-fight losing streak right now for Ian Heinisch. I don't think anybody thought he'd be looking at that when he was coming off of Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series. Decision losses to Derek Brunson and Omari Akhmedov. Neither one of them are overly poor losses. I mean, two very good, solid fighters. And Meerschaert's coming off a victory over Deron Wynn, but he lost a split decision before that to Eric Anders, which is kind of troubling to me, especially heading into a fight with Ian Heinisch. And I'm going to tell you why. Meerschaert seems to have struggled then and throughout his career with kind of athletic guys who come forward and are strikers and somewhat of maulers to a degree. And because Meerschaert is so tricky off the ground, I mean, the dude is super experienced. He has 23 wins in his career by submission. But I still have seen him get overwhelmed and dominated by the athletic mauler, which is what Eric Anders is. And Eric Anders is not anybody that's you're writing home about as this complete fighter. But I think stylistically, what Eric Anders brought to Meerschaert was a problem. And I think that that is a kind of a style and approach that Ian Heinisch can not only mirror, but actually even do better than Eric Anders did. And that has me worried about Meerschaert, who has shown the tendency to get caught by some big stuff at times. He's 31-12, and if you look at his losses, he's only been knocked out one time, but surprisingly enough, he has been submitted quite a bit. I don't think that Heinisch will submit him. That's just not generally his route to victory. It's not really the way he goes about it. He's a guy who wants to finish. He generally seems like he wants to finish with his hands. He has 4 wins by KO, only 2 of them by submission. Actually hasn't even won a fight by submission since 2017, which was before he was even in the UFC. So I'm telling you, I don't like Meerschaert's chances in this fight. Obviously, he could get the victory. These are close odds. But I like Ian Heinisch. He's tough as nails, has an excellent gas tank. He pushes forward, and I think his style will give Meerschaert a problem. And I think he gets a unanimous decision or a 3rd round TKO victory in this fight, and stays consistent with those odds. I just like this stylistically for Ian Heinisch more so than I like it for Gerald Meerschaert. The next fight on this card that we're talking about is Alex Bruce Leroy Caceres taking on the teenager. Well, he's not a teenager anymore. He was once the teenage dream. Now, because he's 20 years old, he'll be 21 later this year. It's Chase Hooper. Now he's just the dream. Chase Hooper still looks like he is a lost member from That 70s Show or something. Like, I mean, this kid, he looks so young. It is just, when you see him fight, you almost feel like, am I supposed to be watching this? But he's really, you know, like I said, in September, he'll be 21 years old. He reminds me a lot of Joe Lauzon. I think he has a higher ceiling maybe than Lauzon, but he does remind me of him. He's tough as they come, just like Lauzon. And he has this fantastic Brazilian jiu-jitsu game, just a ground game overall. He really utilizes his long limbs and positioning really well. He's not the most athletic and fluid striker, but he is 6'1", has really good length, fighting at 145 pounds. He's a real deal. He's the real deal. 7-0-1. And this is a good step up for him, fighting a veteran and an older, a full-grown man in Alex Caceres. Caceres is a really dangerous striker who is unorthodox. He has decent cardio, but he can be careless on the ground, right? He has already been submitted 7 times in his career. That is like his Achilles heel. That's his bugaboo, getting careless on the ground and getting submitted. His keys to winning this fight is he's going to have to prove that he can, first of all, stop Chase Hooper's takedowns, because it's going to come at some point. Perhaps even getting taken down and then making it back up to his feet after being taken down. That usually shifts the momentum towards the guy who is defending the takedowns more so than not. I mean, and I think obviously the odds makers are looking at Chase Hooper as being that part of his game really taking precedence or just taking over in this fight. He's a -177 favorite according to Bet Online, and Caceres is a +152 underdog according to Bet Online. So I think, but that's how Caceres, if he's gonna win, that's how he has to win. Now, if Hooper's gonna win, his keys are to avoid taking anything major from Caceres on the feet, especially early in the fight. Caceres is liable to do all kinds of attacks, using the cage, springboards, all kinds of stuff, right? He can do it. But Hooper has to be patient. He can't rush in. He can't telegraph any of his shots. And when I say shots, I'm talking about takedown attempts. He has to be patient and take advantage of getting this opportunity. If and when he gets this fight to the ground, he has shown the ability to gain. I mean, I've seen him take triangle mounts from, top position and rain down punches in that way. I've seen him get on the ground and submit guys. He's got some stuff. This Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series alum has some layers to his game, and he's actually only getting better. Right now, I already think that his ground game and his prowess on the ground, considering Caceres' susceptibility to the submission, I like Chase Hooper getting the victory here. I like him getting the victory by 2nd round submission. And this is the type of win that's going to really, like, he's already got a little bit of buzz about him, right? But if he beats Caceres and chokes him out, taps him out, I think that's going to get some people's attention, and you might see this kid getting a chance against a ranked fighter in just the 10th fight of his mixed martial arts career, not long after his 21st birthday. So it's something to watch out for sure. I like Chase Hooper getting the victory here. In our next fight, Sugar Sean O'Malley taking on Eddie Weinland. This is, aside from our main event, which of course we're going to talk about in a second, aside from our main event, this fight has the biggest odds on the whole card. Sugar Sean is a -500 favorite. Wow. That is either a lot of respect for Sugar Sean O'Malley, a lot of disrespect for Eddie Weinland, or a combination of both. It is a lot going on here. I think it's actually a pretty decent matchup for O'Malley at this part of his career. He's 11-0. He's a really good striker, tough guy. Eddie Weinland's a tough guy and a strong, powerful striker. But he does have some holes, I think, in his defensive stand-up game. He gets caught a lot. He's also got a really long neck, and he kind of holds his head straight up in stand-up exchanges. And I've seen him caught a few times. He doesn't get stopped a lot, right? Doesn't get stopped a lot. Then he got a stop by Henan Barral a few years ago, and I believe there's one other stoppage loss for him in his career. But for the most part, he has avoided taking that kind of big shot that stops him. He's been stopped 3 times by strikes. The last time he got stopped by strikes was the first round knockout by Johnny Eduardo back in 2014. 2013, he lost by strikes, of course, to Henan Barral, like I mentioned. And then the other time he got stopped by strikes was so early in his career, it barely even matters. It was actually from an injury back in 2004. So this guy's been fighting a long time. 16 years ago was the first time he was stopped. He's 24-13. He's 35 years old. That age there is probably significant. Last time he fought was in June. He knocked out Grigory Popov, who's a really good fighter. So that's something to keep in mind. But Popov's not Sean O'Malley. Sean O'Malley, his height, his athleticism, the creativity in which he delivers strikes, that's the reason why he's such a favorite here. He's also 4 inches taller than Weinland, longer reach in the arms, longer reach in the legs. I think he's a slicker athlete than Eddie Weinland. So I do think he gets the better of him. Now, I guess one of the biggest things to think about here in this fight is Sean O'Malley going to get the finish? I think a lot of people feel that he gets the victory, but does he get the finish? And one of the things to look at, I don't have this on the screen right now, but BetOnline has the over-under, the over for this fight going more than a round and a half is -160. Going under a round and a half is +130. So a lot of people don't think this is going to get out of the second round. So that's why, they're thinking this is going to be a quick domination. Now I'm going to tell you, you might want to take the over here, because I think that O'Malley wins this fight. I think he wins it pretty convincingly, but I think Eddie Weinland makes it out of the fight. I think he gets beaten by a unanimous decision. Weinland hasn't been super tough, super easy to stop, and that's one of the reasons I say that. I am picking O'Malley, but just in a little bit of a bonus, I do think that Weinland gets out of the second round at least and goes the distance. So that's just a little bit of a bonus that I'm gonna throw there. Hopefully I don't regret giving out extra information. Next fight on the card, Neil Magny against Anthony Rocco Martin. Good fight. Very good fight here. Two guys who kind of been around for a while, haven't really gotten the opportunities to fight them, at the top of their weight classes. Magny has fought better fighters for sure. I think he's faced and beaten better guys than Rocco Martin. Rocco Martin's kind of feels like he's on like a fast track right now. He's like, I got to get it done. I want to get in the ring. I want to get in the octagon with the best guys. I'm ready. He's super aggressive, super eager every time you see him fight, fired up, and it's good. And he's a good fighter. The only thing of it is he doesn't get a lot of stoppages. He only has 1 stoppage by TKO in his entire career. And if you look at Neil Magny is a tough guy to submit and to beat on the ground. I mean, most of the guys when you look at the way that Magny's career has gone, the people that he's faced, the people that he's lost to, he's 22-7. He has 2 losses by KO, 4 of them by submission. Last time he lost was against Santiago Ponzinibbio back in November of 2018. Got knocked out in the 4th round. Also got submitted by Rafael dos Anjos. Now that's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. Gets knocked out by Lorenz Larkin in the 1st round of 2016. Gets submitted by Demian Maia back in 15. Somehow lost a unanimous decision to Seth Baczynski, but this was super early in his career in 2013. And he also gets submitted by Sergio Moraes in 2013. So he's gotten better. There's huge win streaks in here. There was a 8-fight win streak plugged in there before he lost to Maia, a 3-fight win streak before he lost to Larkin. He's had a really solid run, right? Had a really solid run. Faced, like I said, better guys than Martin. I just feel that his length, his wrestling, and Martin's inability to stop guys with the strikes is really going to be the biggest deal here. Magny comes in as a -143 favorite, according to BetOnline, and Martin's a +123 underdog. And I'm going to have to go with the odds makers here. I just really like the length. And I'm going to point out another thing that I like. The training partners. Neil Magny is training with Team Elevation in Colorado, man, and they got some dogs in there, man. They got some people, I mean, Justin Gaethje, Curtis Blake, they got all kinds of people in there, and they have it appears to me, a really awesome family-like kind of an environment. And now Anthony Rocco Martin, if you look up where he trains, it tells you he trains at American Top Team. And that's true. But not all of these there's more than one American Top Team gym. And Martin's with Chakal in Atlanta. And if you know, all of them are not created equal. The competition and the guys he trains with there is not like the guys that are in Coconut Creek, Florida. So I think that also gives Magny a little bit of an edge too. I think he just legitimately works and rolls with better guys, training for his training camps and just getting ready for fights. And sometimes it's not the best thing to be the best guy at your gym because you only get pushed so far. And I think that Anthony Martin is about to fight a fighter who's better than everybody at his gym just about. And I think Magny gets the victory by unanimous decision or split decision. Obviously, Douglas Lima, I believe, trains there. So, of course, I don't think that Magny's better than him. But I don't know. I like Magny to win this fight over Martin, unanimous decision or split decision. I don't think he gets the victory by stoppage. If he does, I could see potentially a submission, but I'm going to go with getting the victory by unanimous decision and going with the odds makers there. All right, our next one, we're getting down to it. We are getting down to the nitty gritty of this card. And I mean, this one here, you want to talk about tough to call. Aljamain Sterling against Cory Sandhagen was tough to call. Number 2 bantamweight against the number 4 bantamweight in the division. Excellent fight. Such an appropriate matchup right now. You can make the argument Aljamain Sterling should have had a title shot. You certainly can. And if you're saying that, I don't think that you're wrong. But this is a really good fight. I don't think striking is not Aljamain's strong suit. Has he gotten better there? Yes, he has. But his basis and his main thing is he's a grappler. He's a good wrestler. He's a good submissions guy. In this fight, though, he has given up some serious height to Sandhagen. So and if you look at it, Sandhagen's a better striker, I think, anyway. So you're going against a guy who is better technically as a striker than you are, and he's 4 inches taller. That could be a problem. Even though, here's one thing to keep in mind. He's giving up 4 inches in height, but Aljamain Sterling's arms are still longer, which we've seen that sometimes in some of these bouts. So I don't know. I think that Sterling can potentially negate some of that length. But then when you think about the length and just put that bare and raw, you're forgetting the fact of how much movement Cory Sandhagen implements. Cory Sandhagen fights like a tall Dominic Cruz in the amount of east-west movement that he utilizes. He uses a lot of different unorthodox types of attacks, and I've seen it give a lot of people some problems. And to have a possibility of really outstriking Cory Sandhagen. I think you got to really bring some power in your game, similar to the way John Lineker did against him. Their fight was really close because Sandhagen picked Lineker apart on the feet, but Lineker had the great equalizer with the strikes and the power, and he ended up hurting Sandhagen in the third. Sandhagen held on and still got the victory from the judges, but that was a part of it that shakes. I just don't think that Aljamain Sterling brings that type of power into this fight so that he can shift the striking in his direction. Now, on the ground, Aljamain Sterling may have a slight advantage, but I don't think that it's significant enough against Sandhagen, because Sandhagen's also very good on the ground. Cory Sandhagen could be a future champion at 135. Aljamain could be as well, but Sandhagen definitely has the skills, the look, the frame, the whole nine. So for me, I think that Sandhagen should win the striking advantages here, and I don't think that Sterling has him outclassed enough on the ground to pull this out. So I'm going to go ahead and go with Cory Sandhagen winning it by unanimous decision. I don't think he stops Aljamain. I think it's possible he catches him with something big like Marlon Moraes caught Sterling. But ultimately, no, I think Sandhagen gets this victory by unanimous decision. This is a slight underdog pick because Aljamain Sterling right now is a -115 favorite and Cory Sandhagen's a -105 underdog. But by the time weigh-ins happen and the whole nine, there is a chance that Sterling, Sandhagen could surpass him. We have to see what happens on Friday and all of that. But nonetheless, I'm going with Sandhagen win this one by a unanimous decision in a fight that I think is going to be really interesting to watch for a lot of people. All right, we're going into our co-main event on UFC 250, and this is Rafael Assunção against Cody No Love Garbrandt. Both of these guys need to win in the worst way. There's really no other way to put it. They both really need a win. Rafael Assunção's lost his last two. Cody Garbrandt has lost 3 in a row. 2 straight to TJ Dillashaw, and then he gets knocked out similarly to the way he got stopped against Dillashaw by Pedro Munoz. I mean, you couldn't have gone downhill more significantly or faster than Cody Garbrandt. I mean, he's on top of the world, knocks out Takeya Mizugaki, who just recently retired. He retired, I believe that was today. He knocks out Thomas Almeida, who looked like he was ready, right? Then he goes and beats and dominates Dominic Cruz to become the champion. Then fights bitter rival TJ Dillashaw, gets knocked out. Fights bitter rival TJ Dillashaw again and gets knocked out, even though TJ Dillashaw may very well have been compromised by, the super energy drug he was taking before he got popped. And then he fights Pedro Munoz, who's not popping for anything, hurts Munoz, but gets wild and crazy and gets hurt and knocked out. Assunção's losing fights mostly because he's often too tentative. That's really why. He's a very skilled striker, very good on the ground, but a lot of times he loses fights because he's just not working enough. And I think that that's one of his biggest issues. He lost to Cory Sandhagen in his last fight, unanimous decision, but prior to that, he did get choked out in the first round by Marlon Moraes. Against Garbrandt, he certainly doesn't have to worry about the fight going to the ground and Garbrandt choking him out. That's just generally not what he wants to do. I think the major question here is Cody Garbrandt broken? Is he broken? Sometimes you can have a loss and it affects you mentally, affects a fighter mentally, and it's kind of never the same afterwards. And the question is that what happened with TJ Dillashaw, either the first loss or the second loss, or whatever? Is that what happened? He is a -137 favorite for this fight, and Assunção's a +117 underdog according to Bet Online. But that's the question you got to answer. I think from a technical standpoint, Assunção's is a little bit better striker from a technical standpoint. But I think that Garbrandt's faster. I think Garbrandt might actually hit harder. But I know Assunção's is better on the ground if the fight were to go there. But Cody's been really good at stopping takedowns and not allowing guys to get him down. I just don't know, because I feel like if Cody hurts Assunção, he's going to go wild again, and because he can't help himself. Like, he literally can't. Like, TJ Dillashaw talked about this, and I hesitate to quote anything Dillashaw said because he's kind of a pariah at this point. But he says that Garbrandt makes the same mistake, and he just gets involved, and we just take advantage of it. TJ Dillashaw's not the only person that's got that tape on Garbrandt. Assunção is a very high IQ fighter, And you got to think he's going to be waiting for that same type of opportunity. The thing of it is Garbrandt going to give it to him? Has he learned? Will he be able to stay poised? And I think that actually fighting somebody like a Sun Tzu should help him stay poised, because a Sun Tzu is not going to agitate him. He's not going to irritate him. He's not a talker, like Dillashaw, even Munoz. Munoz can talk a little bit too. He's not going to do any of that. So maybe Cody can stay within himself. But I just think that Cody is just one of those guys. He's a brawler, and it's going to happen. Once he gets into that flow of things, he's going to start throwing those hands. That hot-headed thing is going to take over. And I think that with a Sun Tzu being just a better technical striker, in my personal opinion, I think he's going to get Cody Garbrandt and hand him a 4th loss in a row. I don't think he's going to knock Cody out. I think he'll daze him and sting him a few times and just outstrike him. It's a possibility. He could knock him out. But I think a Sun Tzu gets this victory. This is another slight underdog pick, plus 117 underdog on Sun Tzu. Garbrandt's a minus 137 favorite. And I belabored this one a lot. I went back and forth. But I'm going to settle down, and I'm going to have the cojones to pick Rafael or Sun Tzu to get this victory. I don't know. Something about Cody has me a little bit scared that he's got an unfixable flaw, and just simply because he just won't commit to whatever the fix is. So that's my pick there. I'm going to go with a Sun Tzu. Hopefully I don't regret it, but that's the one I'm going with. I got a Sun Tzu winning this one by unanimous decision. The main event of UFC 250, Amanda Nunes, the greatest female mixed martial artist in the history of the world. There is no close second. There's nobody else really even in the conversation. It's Amanda Nunes. She's the best. And she is the biggest favorite on this card by a good amount. Minus 625 favorite for Amanda Nunes. Sean O'Malley's a minus 500 favorite. So it's in the category, but yes, it's quite large. Felicia Spencer plus 450 underdog. I'm going to tell you guys something. This fight, I think, is closer than the odds would say. I really do. I really do. You might think that I'm crazy, but I think this fight is closer than people think. And the reason I say this is because Felicia Spencer it's 2 factors, right? Felicia Spencer is tough. She can take shots. We saw her in there against Chris Cyborg taking shots. Couldn't get her out of there. She took a beating. But she had some moments because she stayed in there. She was able to endure some of those shots and still work to try to get to her wrestling, because her wrestling is excellent. We saw her against Megan Anderson. Megan Anderson's a better striker, a superior striker to her. She doesn't pack the same type of power that Nunes or Chris Cyborg does, but she's a good striker, has the length advantage, the whole nine. But Spencer was able to get to her wrestling and dominate that fight. So she has a skill set, I think, that could give Amanda some problems. The problem for Felicia Spencer is every fight starts off standing, and Amanda seemingly gets a different thing to hurt opponents with in the stand-up all the time. And then she starts to exhibit her abilities on the ground, because we forget that she's credentialed as a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. And I'm going to give you an example, right? So she's fighting Jermaine Durandamy, and Durandamy is a professional fighter, is good in multiple areas, even though she's mostly known as a striker. But she gets Amanda in a pretty tough situation on the ground. And for a second, it looked as though Amanda might get tapped out and lose her title. But she was able to get out of that. She ended up getting the unanimous decision victory over Durandamy. But it's a couple ways you can look at that. You can say, she almost lost against Jermaine Durandamy, who's nowhere near the wrestler or the grappler that Felicia Spencer is. Or you can say, here is a person who has gained all of their everything about being a striker, found themselves in a precarious position on the ground, and was still able to get out and find a way to get the victory. So it depends on how you look at it, right? For this particular matchup, I'm going to have to say that I still got to go with Amanda. I just feel that while Felicia Spencer's wrestling is really good and she has the tool set to give Amanda Nunes some problems, she really does. I just don't think that she'll be able to get to the wrestling in a way that is in a dominant position. Amanda's so strong, such a good athlete, and so skilled on the ground in case she does get taken down. Because obviously, you know, all of her training camps are based on making sure you can keep the fight standing. And if it does go to the ground, here's what we're going to do. All of that. And fighting Felicia Spencer, you know, she's been training this whole time for takedowns. Probably been training against guys for takedowns just to make sure that she's prepared for this. So I imagine if she does get taken down, she still is able to get back up, because I haven't seen Felicia be able to do that like that, especially against somebody who's as good on the ground as Amanda. I think Amanda still gets up, and ultimately her advantage in the stand-up just ends up being the major difference. And I think she gets this victory. I think she gets this victory by a 3rd or 4th round TKO. I think Spencer's so tough. I don't know if it's an early stoppage, but I think 3rd or 4th round, Amanda just beating her up ultimately ends up leading to a TKO, whether or not it's the doctor stopping it, a corner stopping it, or the referee stopping it because it's too one-sided. I think Amanda ends up just ultimately being able to stuff those takedowns, get up if she is taken down, and just continue to show her supremacy when it comes to stand up. And I think she gets the victory here. So that's my take on the entire card. I'm hoping and willing I'm going to talk to you guys here in the chat. So once this video does end, you don't have to bounce and leave. We can go back and forth, talk about some of the fights if you would like, what you guys think. I've, of course, been in the chat for this entire video, for the first run of this video at least, and been able to talk to you guys about what's going on. But yeah, I want to see what you guys have to say. But I got Amanda Nunes getting this victory by stoppage. So that's what I have for you guys today. I appreciate you sitting with me, you know, watching and going through the entire UFC 250 card. Like I said, if you have not yet subscribed, please make sure you do. Haven't liked this video, please make sure you do. As always, God bless and peace.